I started the recording. Okay, hi everybody, and sorry, actually, Dhananjay, you're so this session is going to be a very brief overview on the Cod tester framework. I earlier we were planning, the Chetan was planning to give this session, and for some reason, they do not have time. Everybody is busy with the ONS presentations, demos next week, so he was not able to provide us with this. The presentation. So I thought like I'll quickly give you some overview, and because next week we are not available for the we are going to the ONS demo. So I thought probably that will be a good time for you to start and exploring Code Tester, and we could again sync up the second week of April, and we can do some kind of work distribution, and then we can see the status as well. Please stop me if there are any questions. Otherwise, I'm fine with like going through all the slides, and then maybe towards the end we can have the Q&A session. So let me present this. So we are thinking like Hot Tester to be a kind of framework where we also use the framework for some kind of module test, component kind of test, and some kind of yeah, end-to-end test as well. And finally, we would want the Code Tester to see the code, any code platform. It could be like probably like R code, M code, or E code as a black box, and then we connect the code tester to that platform, and then we perform our test. So this is just a kind of block diagram which shows that how we ideally a code tester would look like when it is fully matured. And right now it's just shows about GPON solution because we were working on our code, so that we just put that there. But we want the code tester to be more as generic as possible, so that it could be extended to any platform, mcode and ecode in future as well. So going to the next slide. This is the extended diagram for the same code platform, code tester. So when you have a physical pod, and this is like our code solution that we have, the GPON solution, where you have the ONUs and the OLTs, and
Suchitra,
yes,
one question please in previous slide.
in the previous one, okay.
So here I think so the left hand side is the traffic generation maybe, or not traffic or control generation.
Hmm.
The PRTG upstream, that upstream port is the another output which is going to the tester, right, for analysis.
Yes.
So is that correct?
Um, Actually, ideally, we want to generate 1G, 10G input, sorry, 40G traffic, and then it should be out to the internet. And then we want to validate with the code tester whether we are able to pass through the code platform.
Okay, so what is the functionality of card tester here? It generates the control plane operations, traffic, traffic generation, which comes to the 1G, and then it passes through the card, which is system under test, and then goes through the 40G, and again gets back the tester.
Yeah, ideally, yeah, I understand. I mean, ideally, I feel that this diagram should be changed. It's been,
Yeah.
I think it's like 1 year back slides, some of them. Yeah, you're right. It shouldn't be like
So
like that, in that direction. And we haven't even, honestly, we haven't even gone to that scenario where we are generating the end traffic. This is just a projection. And this is one of the cases like Sienna wanted to have.
Okay. Okay. So when we change it, how it's going to be?
When we change the diagram, you mean?
Yeah.
This is the use case that we got from Sienna. So honestly, this end solution I do not know, but from a core tester point of view, what we want to see is we will try to generate a simulated traffic, and then we either put a simulation traffic or we put an emulator, and then we make sure that we are able to reach to the internet. So we are just defining those requirements right now. So I think
Oh,
the end scenarios, whatever you are talking, would be much further down the line. So even I need to understand exactly what are the correct um, uh, traffic generation scenarios at the end, from the end to end solution.
okay. Okay. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it will be fine if we also contribute, Sujitra,
Oh
from
yeah,
our side.
yes, definitely. Because this, we are all contributing to open source, right? So there is nothing that which is like really proprietary here, and these code, any like framework structure and the slides. Sometimes Sienna gives, and sometimes we add it to the slides as well, right? So,
Okay.
but the exact use case scenarios would ideally be tested by each collaborator later going forward.
Okay.
What we are trying to achieve here as an open source is at least try to get the base architecture of the core tester framework, and then at the end our final goal is to have all these automated test cases running as part of regression, CI based, and unit tests, and also and finally have the end-to-end traffic scenarios where we would run a basic common sanity across, by combining various requirements and have a common generic scenarios instead of going to a particular use case.
Okay. So, what is the procedure? Will it be fine if we send it to you, or how do you submit your test cases or the documentation part of this?
Documentation, yes, we can discuss in our meetings. Today we started with the COD, the test discussion forum meeting. So I would
Mhm.
suggest that that would be a best place to start with your presentation. Let's say if you have some kind of presentation that you want to, and what you are going to achieve, you could
Uh-huh.
you could come up with some presentation, and then after you present, we can like talk about these and how to implement them in a generic fashion, so we can add it to the open source test automation framework.
Okay, Suchitra. Yeah, I'll take your the guidance in that. Okay.
Yes, and also until now, what we had been doing is, since we did not have this forum meetings, we had been meeting like informal meetings, and we used to share the information.
Okay.
Even requirement discussion we used to share like in an offline basis. So
Sure.
now we have a formal process. So that way, like we are all in sync. The purpose of those meetings are we make sure that we are in sync, and we are everybody is working in the towards the common requirement goal. That makes it
Sure.
much better.
Yeah. Got it.
Okay, so I may probably I will point in the slides going through these slides that where to concentrate, and the other areas probably I will just let you know that these might be like old places we might
Mm.
want to change. Okay, so proceeding forward, this is an expanded diagram of a physical pod. And again, probably the specifics of each unit might be different again. This might be a particular, um, um, it might not be a very generic solution again sometimes, and in some configurations the units or the components might change. But if you look at this inside here, if you forget about the ONU, OLT, and the switch on the other side, then you have this management fabric, cord fabric, and these servers here. So what we think is that these cord servers are these are the servers that we are actually running in a physical pod. You could have the head node, you could have the compute nodes. That's the framework here. And sorry, that's the test infrastructure. And then one of these servers could be your core tester, where that is the test server, and you are accessing the entire pod and testing the entire pod by using this core tester server. Or one solution is that, and then other solution of the physical pod could also be that you are trying to deploy the core tester framework in one of the compute nodes as like a container, and then you bring up that container, and then you validate the various components, and sorry. So that's the goal. So any, and again, as I mentioned, this was an idea when we thought to start, when we wanted to have the code. And probably when we start investigating the physical pod, we might get better solutions and how to approach to it. This is like a possible, one of the possible solution, like how we want to look at towards the
Yeah,
end.
one question. So you have shown core servers blocks, right? What are these core servers?
Yeah, so that is what I was trying to say, that these COT servers, just think that these are, this entire thing is a pod, and you have the head node, and you have the compute node, and one another one is compute node. So it's a series of nodes in the physical pod. So it's not like a COT server. It's not like an entire COT server. It's
Okay,
a component in that physical pod.
okay, thanks.
Sure. So it's a expansion in the same, like in the previous diagram, like what this core tester is doing. So instead of having one of the on the compute, one of the compute node, probably would want to deploy a core tester there. And then we have like various test applications that we have written in the core tester itself, and component modules are there. Once the container is created with the core tester, then we launch the test using that container, and then we connect to various modules in that core component. So this one, these the framework. So before going to this slide, I would like to first go through this, and what are the core, like the prerequisites, when we, before even we jump into the core tester, what are the tools that have been embedded in the core tester framework? There are several tools that have been integrated with core tester framework. So this slide is just talking about what are the various tools, and also some of the like the packages, and what kind of test environments we have created in the core tester, and what modules we have covered, um, and like how many test cases and how much we had automated until now. So if you see, there are like pretty much lots of Python modules, and lots of other tools, automation tools, unit test tools are there. Nose, robot, and virtual realnv, some of them are the Python modules. And for logging also we have some tools. So the I think this is just a list of what we have included as part of core tester. The Just to get you an idea, like what are the things which are involved. But to going through each one of them, the best way is, when we are running and developing the core test framework, we would encounter all these tools, and then uh, it will be more clearer when we work with the core test framework at that time. So to have a quick idea, you could just go through online and then just read about each of these tools, what we have included, to just get a brief idea. So I would suggest in that direction. And what we have covered until now, we have functional testing, we have module testing, and this is like the health testing is the one which we want to achieve, like the health of the system. And that we have also already covered some regression testing, and acceptance testing is another one which ideally going forward we would want, like let's say when code 2.0 is getting or 3.0 is getting released. So based on some of the user requirements, on some of the requirements, there could be some kind of acceptance testing and some test plans around that. So
One question, Sujita, Maruti here.
yeah.
I saw, see, I am assuming that all these test cases are being run as part of Jenkins jobs, right?
Most of them, but not all of them yet.
And one more thing I wanted to know is inside every repo, for example, let's say XOS or any other repo under OpenCode, there
Hmm.
is a test directory, and under which the test directory there are also test cases written.
Hmm.
So how they are different than these test cases?
Okay, some of the test cases, if you notice in XOS, especially there is a test directory there. Some of them were written by Mateo, and most of them they have a different framework that they are using, and they are completely unit test modules. And what we are doing is code tester. Ideally, what we want to achieve is kind of system testing framework and automation framework. And the unit testing which we had incorporated is like when Sienna had earlier started with code tester. The framework, the code itself was not matured, so they had to do some kind of extensive unit testing. So that's why we had some kind of white box testing in code tester. But now we are doing and helping the development to create some unit tests, kind of unit tests, using some of the framework that we have achieved with code tester, so that we check the stability of these repos. So when you actually go to each repo, and then you might find a test directory, that directory is maintained by the development.
Okay.
All the tests, whatever system test has access to, everything is in core tester.
Okay, thanks, Sujila. So I'm assuming that as part of every commit which developer does, it runs all the unit test cases inside each of this repo, whatever repo I'm submitting the patch for. And apart from that, it is also running the test from code tester as part of Jenkins.
Yes,
Not
there are.
all.
Yes, there are different several Jenkins jobs. Actually, I will go through those as well for you
Okay.
towards the end of the meeting. That's one area that there is a difference. There are different types of Jenkins job that we have. Some of the Jenkins jobs are triggered by from system test. Some of them are from the development. Probably I'll just give you a quick overview of that when I go to the Jenkins slide.
Okay, sure. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so this is some example of the test modules that have been covered, but ideally there are more to it now, and more enhanced testing is also being done. A system test coverage kind of scenarios for various services that are onboarded in core. So let me go through these are just examples, and let me go through this here. So if you downloaded the code tester repo, this slide just gives you a basic idea of how the framework has been distributed and what are the main components of this code tester framework. So what I put in here in this slide is code tester. We have some kind of build tools, a group of build tools where we are using Gradle and build src directory, config directory, and we have Gradlu and Ansible playbooks and all those. So those are completely related to the way that how we want the code tester to be deployed on a physical pod. So right now we are not using that yet, but this is just a framework that we that it's already put in the code tester framework, so we could use that as part of the physical pod deployment, and bring up an automated procedure of how to install pod, and after that run the test automatically. So though that is one category, so we do not have to worry about this right now. There are a lot of enhancements that need to be done even on the build tools, and most of these development work will go in the next release of code for us. Or if you also have some kind of physical pod available, then then you can start exploring the physical pod, and this is one of the contribution area that we could get involved, anybody could get involved, and then enhance this framework in this build tool area. And another area is the data plane. Another area is the control plane. So the data plane area of the framework structure has been built for the test coverage and the frame test automation framework to bring up and validate the components at the backend. So backend, what I would say is one of the example is VSG, VTN, vRouter fabric, and the vRouter and the fabric components and all that. So how to the framework, how it has been written is like you have a VSG and then it tests thoroughly VSG component thoroughly, like a module based coverage. And if you inspect the automation framework in that VSG component, you would see that lots of methods have been written there and to provide various functionalities of accessing and manipulating the VSGs and the VCP containers as an example in that particular example. So likewise, you have a framework that is being developed by Sienna again for the VTN component. So most of the data plane is has been written by Sienna, contributes to that, and the control plane has been developed by the ON Lab team. So what the control plane is completely, we have the XOS framework and how to, we have the, I mean, the, sorry, by the way, the list over here is talking about the directory itself under that in the core tester, where we have where like let's say in the data plane directory, so which actually starts at src. From going from src, there is a test directory. In that directory you will have all the component modules, and then each component you would easily able to be I mean you will easily recognize each directory by the name of the component itself. And then under that there is a utils directory. In this utils directory, most of the framework which is isolated to each component is again put into this utils directory. So when you go to utils directory, you would see each framework expansion for each of the components there. And then likewise you have a setup directory. This setup directory is the directory where you configure your input files, and then you whenever you want to like build a core test container or destroy a core test container, you would go to that directory and then use the files that what you would want to achieve for your test, and then use those files in order to build and destroy your core containers. And for some of the tests, we also have some input files where we where it goes and fetches these files from that setup directory and then execute tests accordingly. So now going to the control plane, this is another area of framework. So in that, if you go in the code API directory of the code tester, there is a framework directory, and this is a test and properties. Properties is the is a configurable configurable files in those directories where you are in order to test your control plane APIs. You would configure your properties file in that directory. And the test, as the name says, that all the tests related to the XOS APIs are put in that directory. And for the framework, in order to access the tests that access the various components in the XOS module, the framework is written here. And so we try to organize the framework in such a way that most of the framework is isolated and the tests are independent from the framework. So that way there is more scalable option to have independent test modules. When you go forward, you can create like multiple tests, and in the test you can create a data directory where you're holding all your input files for what number of test cases that and so we try to make the framework in such a way that it is as generic as possible. And same with the data plane, so wherever framework we are building. And finally is the logs and logs and docs directory. Docs, we there is lot of docs which are written how to use Code Tester and how to build and set up various here like VM in order to use the Code Tester. So all the documentation is written very nicely. So I would recommend that whoever wants to use the Code Tester, please read the docs and then follow the steps what the doc says, and we encourage that you go through this doc and then follow exactly the same procedure in the doc. And if there are any issues, please let us know so that we can update it accordingly. So the idea behind that is anybody in the community who starts using the Code Tester would look into this README files and then try to like set up their code test framework, their VMs, and all the setup which is required for testing code. So when you go there and if you find some issues that some of the commands are not working, so please ping us on the Slack channel, QSnack channel, and we can analyze and then fix them. And we also encourage that if you find any issues which are related to any of these components while you're running tests, and then if you were able to analyze them and fix them, yeah, feel free to go ahead and fix them and then just add us as the reviewers, and we can take a look at it as well. And there is more to talk in Code Tester, but this is a overall idea of the actual Code Test framework, how it has been organized. With this idea in mind and also reading the docs, you could use that Git repo directory, get it from the Git, pull the Code Tester, and then start running. I would first encourage you to read after reading and setting up the environment to run the Code Tester. Go through, like there is a step where there is a command where you can run the test cases using some sample examples, and when you run them, then it's easier to understand how it is organized and how they are actually run. So that is a brief description of the Code Tester framework. Any questions before I move forward?
Suchitra, I have a question. With this, the data plan and control plan, the Code Tester what we are implementing, will it differ for CIAB and physical pod as well?
Yes, actually, it will differ. Right now, the CIAB, the way we are, sorry, I should take that back. Right now, the
Okay.
framework is little tied to CIAB, the way we are testing and accessing the components. But when we go to the physical pod, I'm like, nobody is sure whether how much framework needs to be changed, because we do not know how the physical pod acts. But let's say when you are accessing a container, most of the framework will be same, but how you reach to that container might be different. So probably that framework might need to be changed.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Once you hit the container and then you try to do or a VM and then you try to access that, I don't think that should change ideally.
Okay.
And also one more point is for the physical pod, I am assuming that once we get into the physical pod and start analyzing the physical pod, we might have a better idea and solutions like how to make the framework as generic as possible, because the ideal solution of the end-to-end test or the test framework should be towards the physical pod. So at that time we would all like, if anybody else in the community or you or anyone else has some ideas about the developing and enhancing the framework, that would be great, and we could discuss in the test discussion forums. So I'll move forward. And
Sure.
sorry, this is a elaborated test architectures, how it is actually testing the code or the ONOS. And again, the slide earlier, it just talks about ONOS here, because earlier there was no complete code integrated solution. So if you look at the bottom part, the last part where the test container is talking about, showing in the picture. So these are the various modules. When you go into that test code test framework directory, code tester, you would see all these components which are written, and some of them are the tools that are integrated as part of the test container. So when you build a code test container, all these modules are loaded up along with the toolkit, which is packed with the code tester framework. And these are the some of the tester modules which I had explained before, like the vRouter component, VSG, and more to be added here, because there are more components that have been added now, like the VSG, VTN Fabric, vRouter, all these things. And here XOS, there is a way to launch XOS containers from the code tester. But now we don't, this was like a kind of unit test, but now since we have the XOS integration already, what we are doing is most of the API tests, what we do is we use the control plane API framework, and then we try and connect to the tests. And all the above part, you can just think that you are connecting to a COD or a CIAB as an example. And one item to mention in the code tester is, like, in the code test framework, there are many ways how you want to test a particular requirement. Let's say, like, the code test framework, it can bring up a setup and then a test setup as an example. Like, it can if you want to test a ONOS component, let's say you are testing a vRouter component or some other module for flows as an example, then there is an option from the setup that you could take while building the test container. It would pull the images of ONOS and install the ONOS on the test client on your VM itself, wherever you're running your test container, code tester, and it would test it, and then it would destroy the installation and then come back. So you ideally do not need a huge server where you want like a ONOS server as an example, a physical server, and then you want to connect to the ONOS. What I'm trying to say is, you could just launch this as part of ONOS in a different container or on a VM, and then it launches and then tests and then destroys. So there is an option that way as well. But now, since most of our tests are related to CIAB and physical pod, so we do specify the setup in such a way that we access the components in a CIAB box or the physical pod as such. Okay, so this slide talks about the Jenkins, how we are doing right now and what we are doing right now. So this is like a very simple diagram. This might change in future, the way how we want to access various pods and how we want to use Jenkins platform. For now, we have unit tests. We have some kind of test that builds a code in a box, installs code in a box, and then there are some regression test cases that are run in the code in a that are validated after installation of a CIAB on that node, whatever we specify. So what we are doing is, in this.
One question, Suchitra. So when we run tests using code tester, the prerequisite would be to have code in a box up and running, right? Or code in a box is brought up as part of test setup. I mean, when I run a test, does it bring up code in a box?
Yeah, I think code in a box setup, we right now, no, we do not. We are connecting to an existing server.
Okay.
We are connecting.
So, okay, please go ahead.
No, we are connecting to an existing server. That's what I was mentioning, that in the setup there is a manifest dash code JSON file, where that by giving that particular file, what it does is it connects to the CIAB instance. what we have mentioned, what we have specified. Otherwise, there is an option in in the code tester where you can actually, instead of even installing the entire CIAB, let's say if you want to test a particular image or a container, then you can just launch that particular image. So here earlier, what Sienna had done was like some of the code tester components they have used pull the ONOS image, install it, test it, and on the same machine, just like
Okay,
any
I got
other
it.
application. So
Okay,
this,
but for a code in the box, we are supposed to bring up code in the box
yeah,
and then run the test
right,
cases.
right, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and then definitely, probably in the setup, in the docs, if you go online and then check in that, they might, I'm not sure if it is already updated, but when you are bringing up the core test container, at that time we have to specify a different setup as part of the connection of this core test container to the CIAB instance.
So this code tester runs on another server, or it is in one of the VMs of in a code in a box?
Right now, we are doing it on the prod, one of the VM, on the
Okay.
on the compute node. So that's the ideal way. Otherwise, we are not able to connect to the ONOS instances.
Okay, fine.
So that's why I put in the box. If you see that in the through the when whatever the test that we are running through Jenkins, what we are doing is the green box in the middle, which is talking about code in a box. So the code in a box, we have a server which we first deploy the code in a box software, install it, and then after installation, then we deploy code tester in the prod VM, and then after the code test container is built, after we deploy the code tester and then we build the test container, then we launch tests on this server, on the CIAB.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Got it.
Okay. And the other area I was talking about is the unit test. So the unit test, how we are doing is we have a VM where we install the code tester. We deploy the code tester on that VM by through the Git repo whenever there is a change. And then we also for that unit test, we some of the unit tests, not every repo in the Jenkins in the core under the code is being tested right now from by us. There are only couple of repos that we are testing, around 4 of them right now, and we have built Jenkins job in order to test those repos right now. And then unit tests are run based on the chain set that hits one of these repos that we have included the test for. And going forward, we might have to add more unit tests for various other repos as well. That is in progress, and depends on how and when we get the requests and what are the prioritized requests for the unit tests, which we want to achieve as part of that release. And the other the other test that we want to achieve is on the pod again. I was talking in the earlier, where we have the physical pod and we want to have various Jenkins job testing this physical pod. One could be like deploying the physical pod and installing it, and then we would want to run the set of regression tests what we have, and some traffic generation tests. There are lots of other tests coverage that we want to run on pod. So this is still is in progress. Right now, what we have in Jenkins is we just have the pod, it builds the pod and installs it, and that's all it does. And we have to still add more tests, and then make sure that whatever we have created in the code test framework for CIAB, we want to put some of the tests in pod and see whether we are able to do it seamlessly. I think most of them would be done, but there are few tests that we might have to change the framework in order to support the pod. So that's still in investigation. So that's how we are using the core tester. And earlier, I think Maruti also asked about the unit test coverage. I would show the Jenkins page, what system test has, what QA has, and what development has. So there are the same repos are also being tested for another unit test coverage. So let's say XOS is one of the area. We have XOS that we are testing for some kind of unit tests. XOS platform install is one repo, and we are also testing service profile, which is old now. And these repos, whenever there is a change set, we we deploy one of the configuration, and then we run the test. And the same XOS directory is also being tested by the development by using a different Jenkins job, uh, totally. And so sometimes we are building in parallel, and several tests are being run.
So we have a doubt here. The development teams also have a unit test. How they are running it with the same help of card tester only, with a specific option. If you say card tester -t, and I can choose which test suite you want to run. Similarly, is there any option in the card tester I can choose, like a system test or a unit test, which is maintained by the development team? Is there any flexible option to I can choose which test suite can run?
Okay, so for the uh, let's say for the CIAB, I know Andy is running some of the unit tests there, and those are completely maintained by him using his own operations there, like the options. But now let's say the actual development test, the core tester, sorry, CIAB is one example where everything is deployed. But the same thing, what we are doing is we are enhancing the coverage on the CIAB. But some of the unit tests, let's say an example of XOS. So XOS, the tests that are run by the development, what we do is we do not install a CIAB at all there. We do not deploy the entire code in a box, or we do not deploy all the containers as an example. What we do is we try to deploy some kind of um, uh, like using Ansible playbook, we try to deploy one of the profiles, and then we run the test. So by doing the, let's say one of the example that we have used is the front end configuration. So in the front end configuration, what happens is it does not even uh, install any other components other than XOS. So none of the, like the OpenStack modules or the other modules are not even required for these tests. So it just has the XOS modules, whatever XOS synchronizers and the containers are required for this front end configuration are built up. It's like a kind of a mock XOS, and using that mock XOS, we validate to make sure that the APIs are sanitized properly, and then there is no stability issues. So all the unit tests are using this kind of test approach. Did that answer your question?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so now the core tester, I think I had already sent you all these links earlier, just to reiterate. These are the some of the links where you can go and then read about core test framework and how to download it and how to run it, and some of the information on the architecture slides, and the modules and the test plans and everything is on the wiki page on the open code from system test. So this is the information about core tester, and what I recommend for any starter on the COT test framework is go through the first download, I mean, go through the wiki pages and also understand the actual idea behind the COT tester. So, how the framework has been organized and what we are achieving, we have achieved, and what we are going from here, and and also once you read the document docs there on the readme file, you try to configure the core test framework by using those steps. And when you run it multiple times, some of the example test cases, then reading through that particular test would help you understand more. And before that, let's say if you had picked up a test case on VSG as an example, and you're trying to run it, before even you try to understand the framework, what I would suggest is, I assume that everybody might be also knowing CIAB in like the components, how VSG works in a CIAB as an example, and then how we access the VSG, and try to access the VSG manually, and then inspect the containers within the VSG, and see how the CIAB has been actually um, developed, and how various containers are linked, and how the signals, I mean, how the data and the pings are going from where to where. After analyzing the CIAB, then if you run one of the tests from VTN or VSG, it will be much easier to understand. And it's the same case with the control plane as well. If before even running the XOS API test, it would be very easy, like very easy to understand when you access the the XOS pages. After you install the CIAP, inspect the various XOS that are used as part of the test, and then when we understand how like a add subscriber works or a post tenant works, and how an instance works, and how they are related, each API is related, and once we run the test, then it's easier to correlate, like, okay, this functionality to this functionality, and the framework is easier to understand as well. So I'm just providing you a suggestion. This is one of the suggestion which I also usually do when before even I jump into reading the framework. So I better understand it that way, and I thought I should suggest you all as well.
Thanks, Suchitra.
So for any defects, Suchitra, for any defects that we find, so that those can be submitted,
Yeah, defects in the sense, are you talking about defects in the code tester, or?
no, no, card tester as well as the card software.
Okay, the card software, yes, you can post it on the Slack first. There is a XOS as well, because I know that you have been using the general XOS channel. Sometimes there is another channel if you are like now going to get involved in the core test framework automation development. So I would recommend that if you have not joined the XOS channel on the Slack, please join that. And when you post the questions there and the issues there, you would get responses more frequently than on the general channel.
So, Suchitra, one question: how do we test the UI part of the component? For example, let's say I want to see how Django part of XOS works. Is there any test cases to test that part?
No, not yet. I think what we want to do is that will be the last stage.
Okay.
Yeah. But that was also one of the requests that came up. Let's say we have finally, when we are done with everything, when we want to do the acceptance test as an example, then that could be a very simple test. Going through
Okay.
the UI and then performing the complete service chain and then testing it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks.
that if you are interested, yeah, that would be one more area. But before jumping into that, maybe I would prioritize the development of framework first.
Okay.
Yeah, more probably next release that could be also looked into it.
Okay. So, Suchitra, is there any plan that is put in place every release, in the sense, let's say, is there any planning done in COD 2 dot when COD 3.0 development starts, saying that okay, what you want to achieve in coming 3 months when COD 3.0 comes or COD 4.0 comes?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
Yeah, there is. And also now we also put QA strategies also there. And even the development also has all the, during the planning session, all the requirements are finalized, and what are the major features and contributions that we want to achieve as part of the planning meeting. That is the agenda.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, and then I could also share with you the QA strategy that we went over, that what are the code testing goals for 2017. So Gunaseelan had attended the meeting in the morning. So this summarizes like what we want to first focus and prioritize as part of the goals for 2017.
Okay.
And most of it is we are going through the one of the area is the performance test, one of the area is completely enhance the automation framework, at least to support the base platform, and also try to run more and more tests on the physical pod. So going forward, I think we should be jumping onto physical pod and make sure that the framework becomes more generic for the for any pod to connect to, and
Okay.
develop tests on those on the on the sorry, on the physical pod.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No, as of now. If we have any questions, we may send you a mail or we may ping you on Slack.
Yes, please. Yeah, I think QS Lab will be good to start with any kind of system test kind of questions and the framework related questions also, and we could help you going forward.
Sure.
And probably next week we are all in the ONS demos, so we might not be able to respond to you very fast. The following week, April, second week of April, should be a good time if there are any sync up that you want to do, and if you want to come up and take up any tasks, then we could discuss and have a call the following week.
Sure, no problem, Chitra.
Okay. So
Thanks, Chitra, for your time to go over this architecture and give us a start on this code tester and some idea on to get started. So definitely, we have started spending time on coding a box and we're trying to run test cases. So it's a good start here. Thank you.
okay, sure. No worries. Yeah, thank you. And thanks for your contributions as well. We look forward to for your contributions.
Yeah.
Thanks, Suchitra.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you all. Thanks everybody. Nice talking to you.
Okay, thank you. Good night.
Bye bye.